Step into a Gilded Age boarding house where the wallpaper peels, the coffee can stand up by itself, and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's promotion or heartbreak before they do. Privacy? Only on Sundays, and only if you cough politely. Take a breath. It smells like boiled cabbage, coal dust, and ambition. Boots thud on the stair treads, a bell dings at the front desk, and somewhere a piano struggles through after the ball with 2 good keys and several that are strictly decorative. In the hall, steam from the kitchen, gossip from the parlor, and a tide of people washing in and out of their rooms like the city's own lungs. Rent is paid by the week, hope is budgeted by the day, and breakfast comes with a side of eavesdropping you didn't order. This is the urban engine of late 19th century America cheap beds, close quarters, and lives threaded together by thin walls and thinner coffee. Night shifts pass, day shifts on the stairs. Telegraphers and typists trade places with printers and constables. Hats tipping, eyes half shut, payrolls and dreams overlapping by 20 minutes. House rules run the place like railroad timetables. Curfew at 10. No gentlemen upstairs after 9. No cooking in rooms. No boots on the quilt. Unless you're the landlady, in which case the quilt wears your boots. Coal is rationed, reputations guarded, radiators negotiated. If you need heat, bring charm or exact change. Downstairs, the parlor is a social switchboard. Cut flowers in a chipped vase. A stereoscope with views of Niagara everyone pretends to be astonished by. And a velvet settee that has witnessed more proposals, quarrels, and silent calculations than any church pew. News travels faster here than by wire. Raises, strikes, engagements, evictions, passed hand to hand with teacups and card games. Matchmaking happens between hymns and headlines. Scandal ferments beside the umbrella stand. Tonight we'll move slowly through this house. The ledger at the door, the iron bed with its ticking mattress, the bath cue, the fire drill, the breakfast line, the job board tacked with crooked pins. We'll meet the landlady, mayor, judge, and thermostat, and the boarders who pay, pray, and borrow in equal measure. Cozy, creaky, a little bleak, and very human. This is History Lullaby. We tuck you in with creaky floors and questionable coffee. Pull the quilt up, mind the springs, and listen close. The walls are thin, the city is loud, and the night is just getting comfortable. The bell over the front door rings like a schoolmaster's triangle bright, precise and faintly judgmental. Beneath it, a narrow desk stands guard, ledger open like a hymn book. Ink bottle to the right, sand shaker to blot the wet entries. A tray of rent receipts folded into neat triangles, as if discipline alone could balance a dozen precarious lives. A brass plaque on the wall reads, in elegant, unyielding script, "Rent due Saturday noon." No exceptions. The capital letters do half the scolding. The landlady does the rest. She appears without seeming to walk, one of those women who materialize in doorways like a draft. Bun, pinned like a fortification. Keys at her waist chime softly. A warning more than a song. She taps the ledger with a pen nib the way a judge taps a gavel. Name, trade, week paid. Her voice is perfectly polite and almost impossible to lie to. You sign where she points. The pen is scratchy, the line is long, the smell is coal, cabbage, and coffee boiled past apology. Over her shoulder hangs the house schedule, written in a hand that brooks no backtalk. Curfew 10, parlor hours end 9. Gentlemen upstairs. Never. Ladies downstairs after 9, only with chaperone. Hot plates forbidden, no cooking in rooms, no boots on quilts. Gas turned low at 11. Bath schedule posted daily. Somewhere below that, in smaller handwriting as if added after a particularly enthusiastic incident. No mouth organs after supper. You pass under the transom of the hall, and the building swallows you in one creak. The stair runner is thin in the middle, from years of going up with hope and down with rent. On the first landing hangs a framed sampler stitched by some boarder past. Order is the soul of comfort. The landlady stops there every evening to test the temperature of the radiator with a practiced palm. If it hisses too freely, she shuts the valve. If it sulks, she bangs the iron with the handle of her duster until the pipes remember their duty. She is mayor, judge, and thermostat. House law begins with coal. The bin in the cellar is under lock, and the key jingles at her waist with the rest of the municipal budget. Each room is allotted a scuttle a day when the weather bites, half a scuttle when it only gnaws. On especially icy weeks, she hands out coal checks, little cardboard tokens stamped with the address, redeemable for 1 extra bucket upon demonstration of visible breath indoors. Any boarder caught poaching from the kitchen stove will find their next week's coffee mysteriously thinner. And yes, it can get thinner. Noise is governed like a city ordinance. Typists may practice until 8:30, violinists until 8:45 if they can actually play. Printers returning from night shift must remove boots at the second stair and carry them like contraband through the hall. Boots on quilts is grounds for exile, the landlady declares, and every boarder can recite the story of the traveling salesman who forgot and left a perfect mud print on Miss Turner's patchwork. He's spoken of with the hushed tone usually reserved for train wrecks and cousin scandals. If the rules are the bones, inspection rounds are the blood pressure. Monday and Thursday, after supper, the landlady makes her circuit with a notebook and a deceptively genteel parasol that doubles as pointer, curtain hook, and evidence rod. She taps doors with a parasol tipped 3 brisk raps as her signature, and waits 2 seconds exactly before she lets herself in. Health and safety, she calls it. Reputation. Everyone else understands. Room by room, she takes inventory. The gas turned low, the window sash not wedged open with a book, the bedspread free of boot marks, no damp stockings steaming on the gas jet like a fuse. She peeks beneath the bed for the telltale shine of an illicit hot plate. You can hide it under the washstand, but the onion smell gives you away. She sniffs for cigars. Gentlemen who rent front rooms sometimes imagine themselves immune to the edict, and lifts hat boxes with surprising ease. She does not read letters, not really, but she straightens the pile and her eyes flick once over the handwriting. She is not nosy, she tells herself. She is preventive. Sometimes she turns up love. A pressed bloom in a dictionary, a gentleman's calling card tucked backward behind a frame, a letter whose margins are more honest than its lines. She clears her throat, says nothing, and rearranges the evidence into a bad hiding place a mother might choose. House law is iron. House mercy is velvet. Reputations are economies. Once spent, they do not replenish by payday. Downstairs, the law extends in all directions, like the spokes of a wheel. Shoes go on the mat by the kitchen when snow turns city streets to oatmeal. Umbrellas drip in the stand and must not migrate to private rooms for future weather events. The wall clock is the only true north. Curfew at 10 front door bolted, chain slid, key turned. Return after hours and you must ring the night bell, a shameful clatter that wakes half the house and finds you a nickel into the coal fund. Repeat offenders are publicly assigned the room over the parlor piano. On Wednesdays, when Mrs. Wilkins gives lessons to children with aggressive octaves, that room is a penance and a half. No gentleman upstairs after 9, the landlady repeats to anyone within earshot, and to several people who aren't. The rule is not negotiable, but the reality is human. Courting happens in the parlor, with chaperone chairs and hands that do not stray and a glass of tepid lemonade to settle all thoughts. The landlady sits close enough to guard a reputation and far enough to grant a hope. After 9, she clears throats by the clock until the chairs separate like iron filings from a magnet. Any young man bold enough to try the stairs afterward meets her at the landing, where she has a talent for appearing with a folded towel as if she'd been on her way to do God's own laundry. "Good evening," she says. It isn't. Baths require diplomacy. 2 tubs, one on the first floor tucked behind a curtain, one upstairs near the linen closet. A slate with chalk hangs on a string. Sign your name. 10 minutes. Water is not infinite. Leave it as you wish to find it. Everyone learns the house choreography, ladies, after supper, men before. Sunday morning is a lottery. On wash day, the entire building smells like soap ambition and damp surrender. Towels issued on Tuesdays and Fridays return to the basket or vanish into a private economy. The landlady tracks with the accuracy of a bank ledger. Woe to the man whose towel count exceeds his rent receipts. The kitchen is a monarchy within the republic. You don't enter without a reason, and you don't hover without a task. The cook scowls, the scullery boy clatters, and the landlady is the only one allowed to open the sugar tin with the false bottom where she keeps the employees' wages and the second best opinions. Coffee is brewed to the line on the tin per the house standard stand-up grade, and served with breakfast as if it were medicine. Boarders complain, but they drink it. The landlady knows the difference between grumbling and mutiny. She rations the jam like artillery shells. Rent binds it all together. Saturday at noon, a queue forms by the desk like parishioners at confession. Coins wrapped in paper, pay envelopes creased thin from counting. She licks her finger to turn the page, writes each amount in a steady hand, and draws a tight line through any arrears like a seam. Those who are square receive a slip and a nod. Those who are short receive a look that is not unkind and an arrangement that is not generous. Half week, 1 pillow, parlor privileges suspended, coal reduced. 2 weeks short, and the room begins to look at you with someone else's eyes. Yet, for all the law, the house doesn't feel like a jail. It feels like a city, edited down to 30 rooms. The landlady is usher at its rites of passage. She keeps a drawer of spare collar buttons and safety pins. She pins notices to the hallway board. Church supper on Thursday. Typist needed at Everly & Sons. Respectable roommates sought for attic front. Be on guard for pickpockets near the L. She accepts packages from the post, arranges for doctors when influenza creeps along the banister, and has a ceremony for every new boarder. A quick tour, a faster speech, and the house catechism, delivered with a smile that stays just on the safe side of kind. Curfew at 10. Parlor for callers. No gentlemen upstairs after 9. No cooking in rooms. No boots on quilts. If you must sing, choose a hymn. If you must smoke, take the alley. If you must quarrel, keep it to the parlor and use indoor voices. Coal is dear. Reputations are dearer. You nod, because everyone nods at rules they plan to test. On the second floor, Miss Avery, the telegraph operator, has already internalized the code. She eats in the kitchen on the late shift, treads soft past 9, and folds her shawl over the gas jet so her shadow doesn't advertise a life after curfew. Across the hall, Mr. Mulligan, the night watchman, hands in his rent an exact change, never speaks above a whisper, and sleeps like a collapsed umbrella from noon to 4. The house absorbs their schedules like a tide chart. The landlady keeps a mental map of who passes whom on the stairs and which hellos need a chaperone's echo. Courtship has its own footnotes. The parlor door stays half open. The sofa springs squeak like testimony. The stereoscope is the official third party. Niagara Falls, the landlady suggests, placing the card in the viewer with a neutral flourish. Couples gasp dutifully. Nothing breaks the spell like landscape, which is why she uses it. If the conversation ventures toward hearts and futures, she polishes a non-existent smudge from the glass until the words choose modesty. If it edges toward proposals, she finds a reason to deliver tea so the moment can land with something in the hands. Enforcement isn't all scolds and glances. Sometimes it's a rescue. A boarder arrives gray with bad news. The landlady quietly switches their room to the sunny one without charging extra. A letter comes for the seamstress with black edging. The landlady sits her at the kitchen table and pours coffee that remembers sweetness. When someone gets fired, the landlady empties the job board of every spare card and sends 3 boarders out as scouts. When someone gets hired, she tucks a small jar of jam under their toast without making a speech. She is a magistrate who can pass sentences of mercy. Of course there are violations. A hot plate scorches a dresser, a circle of shame. She fines and forgives in the same breath. A cigar burns a neat hole in a curtain. The offender spends 2 Sundays laundering linens. A gentleman attempts a staircase after hours. He meets the landlady's parasol and the stair that comes with it. She has 3 stairs: bookkeeping, bath schedule, and you are being a fool. The last can move furniture. Fire drills are her theater. Once a month she claps her hands in the hall, and the house empties down the stairs with decorum. Boarders practice taking only what they can carry in one hand: shoes, purse, a photograph, the rent receipt if they're funny. She times them with the wall clock and threatens to post the slowest on the board for educational purposes. No one wants to be educational. She reviews: gas turned off, windows shut but not locked, doors closed, towels under thresholds if smoke comes. She assigns Mr. Mulligan to the hydrant and Miss Avery to the ledger, and herself to the front step with a head count that's never wrong. Afterwards, there is cocoa and a short lecture on boots and quilts. You begin to see it. Her rules are not just fences. They're scaffolding for people who climb all day and return too tired to build anything from scratch. Her law makes a kind of sleep possible in a city that does not know how. It turns strangers into neighbors and neighbors into witnesses. It keeps the landlady awake so the rest can pretend they aren't. Night rubs its back along the windows. The gas mantles whisper down. Somewhere a clock strikes 9 and the parlor empties of suitors like a tide receding from a pier. The landlady makes her last round, taps the doors, checks the valves, counts the towels, glances at the ledger like a mother at a crib. At the front desk, she straightens the pen, caps the ink, and lays a small brass bell on the blotter for morning. The keys at her waist go silent. She lifts the chain, throws the bolt, and listens to the building settle into its chorus of pipe hiss and tired breaths. She has one joke she tells to kindly boarders at the end of their first week, the closest she comes to wit. She points at the framed rules and smiles with her eyes. House rules are simple, she says. And for a heartbeat, you think perhaps they are. Breathe quietly and pay on time. Then she laughs once, soft as a curtain, and goes to see if the coffee tin will stretch to Sunday. Your room comes after 3 flights of stairs and exactly 1 moment of regret. The corridor narrows until it's all elbows and wallpaper. The gas mantle hums like a patient bee, and the runner carpet gives up at the threshold as if to say, beyond this, you're on your own. The landlady hands you a key the size of your palm, ornamental, persuasive, not necessarily functional, and gestures to a door with paint laid on in historical layers. It opens with the sigh of a world-weary harmonium. Inside, a bed, a trunk, a chair, a hook, a window. That's either a blessing or a joke, depending on which side of the building fate assigned you. The wallpaper is an army of tiny flowers, regimented in repeating ranks, each bloom nodding as though it has grave concerns about your prospects. The floorboards list toward the radiator like ships toward a lighthouse. The whole place smells faintly of coal, starch, and last week's stew, which is to say, civilization. You touch the iron bed, as if greeting a draft horse respectfully, with a little fear. It is honest metal, painted once upon a time, and now chipped down to sincerity. The mattress is ticking striped, densely stuffed with names you can practically feel. Cotton, horsehair, yesterday's hope. When you sit, it accepts you with the sound of paper money being counted. A soft, crinkled hush. There's a pillow that can be coaxed into comfort if you fold it like origami and promise not to move all night. The quilt has seen things. You choose to think of them as wholesome. At the foot of the bed squats your trunk, the one true piece of furniture you own in both fact and feeling. It is table by day, nightstand by night, and confidence at all hours. Under the window, a washstand with a white basin and a pitcher that pretends it has always held water and never secrets. Beside it, a sliver of mirror that flatters no one, a sliver of soap that claims to be lemon, and a nailed shelf with exactly enough space for a comb and your best decision. The room is an essay on economy. Everything has a job, and none of those jobs has looked pretty. The hook there is only one, is mounted with the authority of a commandment. Hats, coats, ambitions. It will hold what it can. Your nicest garment makes a brave, thin curtain between you and the world. When you angle the chair just so and drape a shawl over its back, you can pretend you've achieved privacy by design. Reader, you've achieved privacy by choreography. Deluxe Suite includes one hook and the optimism to use it. Now, about that window. If you drew the front, you've won sunlight like a coin dropped in your palm and soot like the taxman who saw the coin fall. The street view means everything comes to you. The streetcar bell, the hurdy-gurdy, the smell of roasted peanuts, the shouting match that resolves the fate of a hat. The sash rattles in a wind older than the city. You will learn to wedge it with a spoon handle and to call this ingenuity. If you drew the air shaft, you've won a piece of sky, the color of dishwater, and an acoustic miracle. Air shafts were designed to bring freshness. They chiefly import narratives. Someone peels potatoes 3 floors down. Your room smells industrious. Someone practices scales at midnight. Your room acquires ambition. Someone sings After the Ball with more feeling than accuracy. Your room volunteers to be the chorus. The rent arithmetic posts itself in your head like a billboard. Board, which is to say, your seat at the table for breakfast and supper forms the spine of the bill. Then room, the privilege of claiming a 7 by 9 rectangle on this earth as mine. Then the coal scuttle 1 metal bucket per day, when frost paints the window's veins black. Half when the landlady decrees we're merely bracing, not freezing. Laundry is a separate economy, by the piece counted clinically at the kitchen door. Collars, cuffs, shirts, stockings, each a tiny toll to cross the bridge into presentable. If you are flush, you add mending. If you are proud, you attempt it yourself and learn what humility looks like in stitches. Miss a shift, and the whole calculation sways like a streetcar rounding a corner too fast. Saturday comes, whether you were paid or merely scolded. The landlady's ledger doesn't drink, doesn't blink. If your envelope's light, you negotiate. Half week with parlor privileges suspended, coal ration trimmed to Spartan, bath slot at the hour when water is mostly philosophy. If you've had 2 bad weeks in a row, you begin to see your room with a stranger's curiosity. Poverty has a way of measuring everything for removal. Roomtiers form an invisible Castasystem. Front rooms cost extra because the sun remembers them first, and because a gentleman caller might plausibly mistake you for prosperous when he sees you draw the curtain. They also collect smoke like autographs. Your windowsill becomes a chronological artifact. Monday, gray. Wednesday, charcoal. Friday, something you could sketch with. Back rooms look out on laundry lines, and the kind of buildings that are more moral than beautiful. If the air shaft is your lot, you learn the names of other people's dinners and sorrows. You can't see the violinist. You can tell when she nails the high A. You can't see the baby. You can tell when its mother hopes someone else will knock. Gas is included until it isn't. You learn the feel of the mantle when it's turned just low enough to please the landlady and just high enough to spare your eyes. You stop calling the hiss a noise and begin calling it company. On good weeks, you draft a letter by that glow, the paper warm where your wrist rests. On hard weeks, you fold laundry in it and think of all the kinds of clean there are. If the bed is yours alone, the pillow might not be. Night shifters canvass the city by day and collapse by sunlight. Day shifters do the reverse. Somewhere between them, a black market courtesy thrives. Hot bunking. Someone calls it with a grin you pretend not to see. The arrangement is simple. 1 bed, 2 lives that never meet except in the indentations they leave. A machinist working nights pays for daylight rights to a pillow. A waitress who closes late sleeps mornings and slides a nickel under the wash basin so the day clerk can't pretend he never saw it. The landlady's rules are clear. No subletting, but her mortgage is clearer. She watches the hallway instead. If the arrangement keeps peace and pays rent, she looks away, eyes narrowed just enough to maintain jurisdiction. Rotating roommates are the weather. The salesman who whistled never returns from his territory. A letter arrives bearing expensive regrets. The stenographer gets promoted and upgrades to a front room, then back again when the firm restructures. The tailor's nephew comes from the old country and sleeps on a borrowed pallet for 2 weeks while he memorizes the street names and the shape of the landlady's patience. You learn not to ask too many questions and to offer the chair when someone looks like they've had a negotiation with the world and lost by a nose. Furnishings accept their limits, and so must you. The chair is not comfortable, it is dutiful. The trunk lid is not a desk, it is a handshake with splinters. Your teacup rests on a book that has earned the promotion to table. Your washstand holds the basin, the pitcher, the razor, the comb, the tiny brown bottle that claims it will cure headaches and heartbreak. It will do neither, but it tastes like decisiveness. A cracked saucer becomes the ashtray you don't admit you need. A ribbon around the curtain's middle is your contribution to interior design. Some nights the room is a chapel. You whisper your math to the ceiling like prayer. Rent plus coal, plus laundry, plus car fare, plus 1 stamp, plus 1 treat, if hope behaves, equals the week. Treat might be a nickel seat in the gallery, or a slice of pie that tastes like someone else's oven, or the extravagance of shoe polish on a day you stay indoors. Treat might be simply the bath slot you circled on the slate and defended like property with your initials written twice. You become intimate with sound. The iron headboard whispers when your neighbor turns tap-tap, and you picture his dreams in Morse. Radiators converse in clicks and sighs like old men sharing war stories. The air shaft conducts an orchestra of clatters. Soup ladle against pot. Someone laughing, as if they remembered youth. 2 cats discussing territorial rights in key of M blank. The streetcar wire sings high when sleet strings it. The bell rings back. The whole city duets for your benefit. You stop calling it noise and start calling it proof. The bed teaches you angles. In summer, You sleep diagonally to court the breeze that meanders past the sash at 2 a.m., a shy guest late to the party. In winter, you sleep curled as a comma with the extra blanket knotted under your feet so it doesn't migrate. You learn the bedtime ritual known as settling the ticking, a firm, even sweep with the forearms to bully the stuffing into compliance and to dislodge any stowaway grit. If the mattress sags, you rotate it like a compass. If your back complains, you fold your coat beneath the sheet where the spine insists on luxury. It is not luxury, it is kindness. Laundry haunts and heals. The Monday basket at the kitchen door is a confession. Socks that have walked too far. Collars that learn dust by heart. Handkerchiefs that can't hide a cough, no matter how they fold themselves. Each piece earns a chalk mark in the cook's book. When your bundle returns, it brings the faint, clean pride of bluing and the faint fear of the bill. There is no scent like sun-dried linen, unless it is cold-dried, in which case you call it historic. Neighbors pass your doorway like chapters. The seamstress upstairs hums thread through the night. Your pillow picks up a faint bouquet of soap, camphor, and courage from the air shaft. The printer's apprentice comes home with his fingers black and his smile white. He leaves flecks of type on the stair and good news in the hall. Across the air shaft, a woman laughs at a joke you'll never hear the end of. At once, you feel abandoned and included. When the landlady posts a crumpled calling card on the boardroom 14 vacant Saturday, you rehearse who might fill it and how their footsteps will braid with yours. On payday, the room grows, if only by mood. The hook seems sturdy enough for a second coat you don't own yet. The mirror behaves. You purchase a small vase from a pushcart and talk yourself into calling it a bud glass. One daisy transforms the wallpaper from judge to jury of peers. You tilt the chair in the evening glow and let the gas mantle hum into something that resembles peace. On broke days, you savor absurd luxuries. You wash the window with your own hand and feel taller than soot. You mend a cuff and feel cunning. You write a letter and realize your grammar is better than your prospects, and you forgive yourself both. Not everyone fits this room. Some nights, the city undertakes the difficult task of breaking you gently. A missed connection, a delayed pay wagon, a machine jam that wasn't your fault but was your job. The room does not argue, it absorbs. The bed absolves, a little. The hot water in the pitcher is not hot, only warmer than nothing. It still persuades the day to step aside. You lie down, shoes under the bed with their toes pointing toward morning like compasses, and think, one more Saturday. That's the boarding house calendar. You live from ledger line to ledger line. But the days between soften in memory until all that's left is the sound of a key, the scent of coal, and the wallpaper's flowers deciding you might not be entirely hopeless. Every so often the landlady knocks, 3 raps, judgment tempered with routine, and steps in to pretend she is measuring the window for new curtains. She is not. She scans the trunk, closed. The hot plate, non-existent, thank you. The towel, present. The bed, made to her standard. Corners squared like opinions. You're settled, she says, which means she is not worried about you today. You tell her the radiator is sulking. She bangs it with the duster handle like a priest at a bell rope, and the heat remembers its vows. There, she says, as if she has restored monarchy. She has. By month's end, the room has acquired a modest glossary. The trunk is home base. The chair is confessional. The washstand is church on Sundays, barber shop on Thursdays, doctor when necessary. The window is the office of external affairs. The curtain is deniability. The gas mantle is sunset on demand and never to be trusted with wet stockings. The hook is the future. You think that's funny until one morning you find your hat there and realize you were right. It isn't much. It is what most of the city lives on. A narrow room that insists on the geometry of hope. One bed, length by one trunk, width by one person who goes out in the morning and returns in the evening a little more, a little less. It makes you economical with space, yes, but also with stories. What you tell, what you save. Men in corner offices will one day call this efficiency. You call it getting by. If you had to market it, and someone always does, the advertisement would read with punishing cheer. Bright cozy room, iron bed, ticking mattress, trunk space, gas, board optional, respectable house. Near transit, it will not mention the flowered wallpaper's opinions, the way the radiator sighs when it remembers childhood, or the night you woke up certain you could hear your neighbor's promotion before he did. It will not mention the quiet triumph of affording your own coal scuttle, or the low, expensive thrill of a front window when it rains and the city sparkles like an apology. But you'll know. You'll close the door on Saturday with the rent receipt tucked beneath the mirror, and the room will hum approval in pipes and paper. You'll hang your coat on the single hook and look at it. The coat, the hook, the fact of both and feel for a minute, like someone with inventory. You will sit on the edge of the iron bed, feel the ticking welcome you with its soft accounting, and think, I can do one more week, and then you will. The boarding house keeps two kinds of time: what the city insists upon, and what the beds will allow. If you stand in the stairwell long enough, you can watch the tides change. At 5 p.m., the typists and clerks climb like salmon ink smudged wrists, stiff collars steamed by a day's decisions, while the waiters, printmen, telegraphers, patrolmen, and night nurses drift down past them with the patient gravity of ships easing out of harbor. Elbows in, eyes forward, everyone knows the choreography. Evening, says a hat to a bonnet on the turn of the second landing. Morning, replies the bonnet, and they're both right. The landlady is the harbor master of this traffic. She keeps a slate beside the umbrella stand to track the house's private astronomy. Bath, cold, 4:30 a.m., print room lads. Bath, hot 10 a.m., Nurse O'Rourke if coal holds. Kitchen window open for nightmen, pie tin, left on backstep. Curfew exists, but it votes. She issues night keys the way a bank issues confidence, with a lecture and a look. 2 clicks to turn, no jangling on the stairs, and if you wake Mrs. Feldman's baby again, you can sleep in the hall with the hall tree. You learn the uniforms by their footprints. The typist moves lightly so the ribbon doesn't wrinkle in her pocket. The telegrapher's shoes are stained with oil and a constellation of ink points. The printman brings the smell of damp paper and hot metal. Swedish, proud, specific. The waiter's cuffs carry Butter's ghost. The cop's belt squeaks with the sorrows of a long city. They pass in the narrow throat of the stair with a codebook of nods. You first. Your turn. Good luck. At the landing, someone's glove falls. 3 hands reach at once, and the glove chooses for them. Rooms become punctuation marks in a sentence that never ends. Day people sleep like commas brief, civil pauses before the sentence proceeds. Night people sleep like semicolons, longer, more difficult, sneaking meaning in the middle of things. On the 3rd floor, Mr. Kavanaugh, the printer, emerges pale at dawn and pins a note to his door, sleeping kindly wrapped like a librarian, then blackens the edges of a curtain with a stub of candle to plug the light leak. Across the hall, Lola the waitress returns at 2 in the afternoon, peels off shoes that have learned every tile in 3 restaurants, and knots a handkerchief over her eyes like a bandit who has surrendered to the law of fatigue. Sleep here is math. You bargain with minutes like a pawnbroker. 2 hours before sunup, plus 40 minutes on the streetcar, plus 10 stolen in the bathhouse steam, plus 1 on the landing while the kettle thinks equals survivable. If the house is kind, you add a nap, like a tip. If the house is not, you multiply awakenings. Coalman rattling the scuttle at noon. Iceman clanging hooks on the stoop. The gasman checking the meter like a mortician taking a pulse. You evolve hardware. Black paper thumbtacked to the sash. A towel wedged under the door to keep hallway radiance from interrogating you. Cotton packed in your ears and sealed with a whisper of candle wax. The landlady pretends not to see the pinholes blooming like a night sky on the window frame. She has developed a lenient theology where sleep is concerned. The kitchen never quite closes. It only changes languages. At 3 a.m., there's a half pie under an inverted pan to keep the cats from declaring it public. The crust is sullen from yesterday and perfect for now. There's bread that tastes faintly of Tuesday, and a jar of drippings you spread with the reverence of a sacrament. The coffee is a philosophy that predates Mercy boiled dark, left to contemplate its sins on the back of the stove, revived by adding new grounds to old courage. Night people accept it like penicillin, bitter, necessary, effective. Someone has scratched into the wooden breadboard. Turn the wick down. A permanent reminder that gas does not sleep. At 4:10, the printmen come home in a clump, speaking softly out of respect for the sleepers, and because the presses have scoured their voices down to felt. Their fingers are tattooed with the day's headlines, Newsprint dust makes constellations on the doorknobs. The patrolman follows at 5, leather creaking like a warning sign. He hangs his club on the peg by the scuttle and drinks water as if it might argue. If the city had teeth that night, he has the marks. He loans his eyes to the room for a while, scanning habitually even when all he's protecting is someone else's nap. Down in the parlor, the night shift keeps a soft salon. The curtains are mostly closed against the dawn. The gas turned low to keep the upholstery from telling stories later. There's a diction the night knows, fewer adjectives, more truth. Telegraphers recount messages that arrived without mercy, come quick, and the way the wire sings just after midnight. Nurses catalog the pockets of the city where pain refuses to sleep. A streetcar man demonstrates the rhythm of a wheel that needs attention using the arm of the settee. And the landlady shushes him with a look that says the settee will receive no repair requisitions tonight. A violin emerges from its case like a cat. 2 sad songs later, the whole room is rethreaded. Meanwhile, upstairs, the sleepcraft continues. Curtains are improvised from shawls. Shawls are improvised from skirts that did not get the night off. A belt around the pillow keeps it from straying to the cooler side of the bed between one nap and the next nap's resumption. In summer, you drape a damp cloth in the window's path and let the breeze invent an oasis. In winter, you line the sash with newspaper and rehearse the argument that drafts are stimulating to the character. You discover the floorboard that never squeaks if you step left foot heel to toe with the blessing of street varnish. You reclaim the bed from sunlight with a handkerchief tied pirate-wise. Ankles crossed under the blanket so the edge can't slip. Fingers tucked to keep them from arguing your case in dreams. Living hours overlap like transparencies. The stenographer practices ASDF. LK on a phantom keyboard to keep speed. The printer dreams in backwards letters. The waiter recites order calls under his breath. 2 chops, 3 pies, ham, and the typist's ribbon leaves a faint, tidy smell. The printman's hair smells of damp wool and industry. Lola, half asleep, mutters 86, the haddock and everyone understands. The night's dictionary holds words the day never uses. Sometimes the house plays jokes. The coal delivery chooses the noon of a night sleeper. The deliveryman drags the scuttle up the stair like a small iron thunderstorm, apologizing with each step and not stopping long enough for the apologies to matter. The landlady tries to schedule laundry after lunchtime, but the ringer has its own ideas about headline hours. On those days, the night shift bribes quiet into being with peppermint creams for the landlady's youngest and a promise to carry the ash cans later. Economy becomes etiquette. The house remembers. Shared baths become treaty tables. The slate outside the door lists times like train departures. 10:05 Nurse O'Rourke. 10:25 Mr. Kavanaugh. No singing. 10:45 Lola. 11:05 Typist. Hot water if Providence. Everyone signs initials with the gravity of law. When a nightman arrives sweaty from the press room and 3 minutes late, the typist sighs, erases, and rewrites. World peace achieved with the loan of a towel and the threat of a draft. The tub ring accrues to the whole. The landlady inspects like a customs officer and issues fines in lectures. Not everyone in the house meets everyone else. Lives kiss through notes. A paper triangle stuck in the door crack means I stopped by. Good news. Tell you when the sun permits. A safety pin piercing a scrap of blue ribbon on the knob means I borrowed your blue scarf for the matinee. There's pie compensation on the icebox. Lovers try. God bless them. Letters left under doormats. Flowers thrust into water glasses. Plans that run aground on the shoals of shift work and fatigue. Still, the house mother's affairs with a practical tenderness. The parlor lamp burns a touch higher on Sundays. The landlady looks the other way when hands meet at the banister's curve and separate at the squeak of a step. Work follows sleepers into bed like a stray dog. The telegrapher hears phantom clicks and answers them in the language of thumbs. The cop sits up at the creak of a floorboard 2 rooms away and falls back only when the second creak says cat. The printman's ears ring with the press's great iron heartbeat. He drifts off when a trolley bell outside replaces the rhythm with something gentler. The nurse dreams the inventory of her satchel safety pins, gauze, tincture, then wakes to bandage her own blister with a dignity that makes the plaster behave like linen. Meals obey the sun only in theory. At 1 a.m., the kitchen hosts burnt toast philosophy, a sermon of crumbs. Great men, says the streetcar man, are like overdone crusts. You scrape, and still the black remains. The printman counters, that's the ink. It never leaves completely. Someone points to the coffee and says, "Be grateful. It's too tired to be bitter." Laughter is kept to spoon clinks and shoulder shakes. No one wants to answer to the landlady at this hour. A jar of pickles migrates from icebox to table and back like a reliable comet. Milk bottles sweat in their wire carrier. Butter behaves only under a stern knife. There is a church of quiet hours, and it has rules. Doors close with the softness of envelopes. Boots walk in their socks to the bed and pull the socks after. Whispers are measured out with teaspoons. Laughter travels folded in a handkerchief. When someone forgets and the stair complains at 2:17 a.m., 9 rooms shift in the sheets at once. The offender presses his spine to the plaster and feels the house's pulse pipes ticking. A distant cough, a snore with a story under it, and remembers himself small in the best way. Winter complicates the truce. The radiators argue at noon like deputized kettles. The Iceman's tongs audition for cymbals. A day sleeper, desperate, invents rain noise by balancing a cup under the leak at the window so the drip's rhythm becomes lullaby instead of indictment. In summer, the air shaft rises with hot gossip and frying onions. Nightmen prop doors with chairs to coax a draft as gentle as a second thought. The landlady tolerates precisely 1 inch of open door per tenant and no more. Civilization is the distance between comfort and scandal measured in inches. The parlor's clock does not tell time. It tells allegiance. Night people set it 5 minutes fast for the comfort of beating fate. Day people set it 3 minutes slow for the pleasure of stealing some. The landlady squares it to the train schedule when no one is looking and calls this order. The clock disagrees, then relents. All governance in the house works this way. You begin to recognize the virtues that night breeds. Courtesy without ceremony. Mercy without memo. A typist leaves 2 biscuits on a saucer for a man she knows only as Broad Shoulders Room 18 because she's seen his boots slouch in the hall at dawn. A policeman carries the milk crate up the stairs with his free hand because he is going that direction anyway. A nurse sews a button on a coat that does not belong to her because she has 10 spare minutes and a needle in her lap. No one writes laws, everyone enforces them. And there are bad nights. The press chews an apprentice's sleeve and the foreman shouts. The cop sees a thing he will not say. The cafe closes early because a man broke a glass with his face. Those nights the stairs bear heavier feet. Doors shut, then open again, then shut more gently, as if apology were air. The house gathers itself in the old ways. Kettle on, chair pulled, long story told in an even voice to fill the space where the mind would otherwise echo. Dawn finds the worst of it blunted and the coffee pot rinsed. Not forgiveness exactly, but a form of forward. By late morning, the house resembles an odd museum. Sunlight on closed doors with hand-lettered warnings. A row of boots dozing. A stovetop populated by cooling irons. The parlor full of folded newspapers so early their headlines are still possibilities. In a third-floor room, a scarf hangs from a hook like a pennant that says, "We live here." On the sill, a letter waits for its addressee to return from the other half of the clock. You learn that time doesn't pass equally. It pools, it eddies, it vanishes under errands, and then returns in a nap so dense you wake with stripes from the ticking on your cheek. What binds the 2 shifts is not schedule but faith. The practical, daily kind. Faith that the door will be left on the latch, that the cup will be turned right, side up on the drain board, that a note in pencil will be understood, that a laugh will not be too loud, that a chair will be returned to its indentation after a midnight sitting. The house is a machine for belief in small things. It runs on nickel lamps, on coal counted out, on coffee that died bravely, on shoes left toe out, so that when you rise in the wrong part of the day, you still know which way the world goes. Stand again in the stairwell at noon. Mr. Kavanaugh's curtain is a dark ocean in a bright day. Lola's handkerchief has slipped 1 inch and revealed an eyelash that looks like a crow's feather. The typists come home for their dinner hour with the fierce purpose of the hungry. The patrolman sleeps with one palm open as if catching rain. Somewhere, a toaster sins and sets off the landlady's warning cough. The guilty scrape becomes the house's metronome. You think, no one here sleeps at the right time. Then you think, maybe there is no right time, only the time you can keep. The parlor is the house's public square too, rugs wide, 3 conversations deep, and 1 gas mantle away from too bright. Step through the arch, and you cross from survival to society. The wallpaper here still believes in itself. A Boston fern reigns from a jardiniere like a green chandelier. On the little table sits the family album of people nobody in the house has met. A silver calling card tray for cards no one quite knows how to use. And the landlady's bell, a bright note that breaks arguments the way lightning breaks heat. In the corner squats an upright piano with big dreams and two honest keys. The middle C is heroic. The G above it tells the truth, and the rest negotiate. On Sunday evenings, someone coaxes hymns out of it. On weeknights, it supports a style of waltz, best described as determined. Between the piano and the antimacassar bristling settee stands a stereoscope oak handle polished by Wonder Plus, a fan of cards. Niagara leaping forever, the Alps in cardboard snow, a street in Paris, frozen under hats. One by one, residents stick their faces into distant worlds and say, "Mercy, look at that." Then they pull back to the soft scrape of a coal shovel next door and the faint rasp of a neighbor reading aloud. Because reading is a sport here, the parlor holds a basket of newspapers that smell like basement courage, a stack of magazines passed down from richer hands, and a single novel traveling in chapters through the evening paper. Someone with a good voice sits in the best chair and becomes a phonograph. They lift the hero out of the typesetting and lay him across the rug. They fold the heroine into the creases of the curtains. A dozen listeners knit, mend, polish, or just stare with that particular look the tired have when story does their breathing for them. The landlady claims she doesn't care for romance, but can quote verbatim any chapter where a dowry goes sideways. Courtship thrives under supervision. The parlor is neutral ground, a battlefield striped by antimacassar. Young men advance in increments of teacups. Young women retreat behind the fern and then, strategically, forget a glove. The settee knows more than most priests. The landlady sits with her ledger open like scripture, pretending to total coal while executing the ancient art of chaperonage. Her eyebrow semaphore is famous. Left brow up means mind your distance. Right brow up means poor thing. Both brows mean rent. A cough from the piano-sharp single signals you are about to be remembered in the rules. The classified ads of the parlor never see print. They are spoken over whist and weak tea. Sewing machine company wants a girl with shoulders. Restaurant on Pearl Street needs hands that know oysters. Mr. Adler's looking for a boy who can carry proofs without reading them. References are minted here like small coins. She's steady. He's quiet. They're honest, but watch payday. A letter of character drafts itself sentence by sentence while the whist tricks fall. Someone offers fine paper. Someone else lends a fountain pen that blots like a thundercloud. And before you can finish your biscuit, a future has been notarized by nods. Not all futures point up. Promotions arrive in whispers first, then in handshakes, then in the social ceremony of the extra coal scuttle. Strikes arrive the opposite way, first as a rumor that sits low in the chair, then as a leaflet passing from palm to palm, then as a new quiet between friends who work for different men. Engagements sprout like geraniums, sudden, hopeful, and break like teacups, quick, ringing. Everyone's staring at a very interesting piece of air until the landlady returns with the dustpan of mercy. The parlor keeps score with posture. Who sits on the edge of the chair ready to leap? Who leans back as if two cushions could make a future softer? The parlor also serves as the morning newspaper for those who never see morning. Night shifters hold a dawn edition at 8 p.m. when their midnight approaches. The printer unfolds his hands and tells what the city shouted in lead. The nurse folds hers and tells what it whispered in pain. The streetcar man, with a dignity that makes the chair behave, demonstrates how a woman reached for her purse just as the conductor rang the bell grace under timetable, he calls it. In exchange, the typist reports that the boss's blotter revealed 3 names written hard enough to dent the desk, which is how the parlor learns a promotion is coming before the promoted does. Every object in the room is complicit. The stereoscope conducts crises. After the first view of the pyramids, the broken-hearted insist on Paris. After Paris, everyone sees the Rockies and recovers their breath. The piano coughs to interrupt politics and sings to soften pride. The tea thinks modest thoughts in cups chipped by good stories. The sugar tongs pinch rumor like a crab. A basket of darns grows and shrinks with the news cycle. A domino set appears when conversation needs a spine. Scandal here rarely shouts. It circulates like a draft. It begins in the folds of a newspaper left open to the society page, not that we read that nonsense, and continues across the carpet in a low, precise tone. Mr. Ellis of room 7 went to Coney with a lady who wears a hat like a decision. Miss Pratt of 12 Amperes has a second cousin at the Telegraph who says the mayor's nephew didn't pass his own exam. Someone keeps a hot plate in 4B. Butter does not smell like that by itself. The landlady's eyebrows conduct the orchestra. No names if the fern can hear you. Full names if someone's rent has gone astray, and pity must be clouded with awe. Newcomers learn quickly that a parlor conversation is a ladder. Every sentence you climb buys you a rung of belonging. You begin on the lowest rung: weather, rent, coal. You rise to the second neighborhood news: prices of eggs, rumor of influenza on the next block. The bravest ascend to the third bosses: unions, that senator who wears the city like a boutonniere. The landlady taps the bell and a general retreat occurs to rung 2 with teacup speed. After 10 cups and 3 songs, the conversation descends to the first rung, and everyone goes to bed feeling they have said enough truth to sleep. Whist and euchre are the currencies of reputation. Partners are chosen with the gravity of treaty signings. A good play earns a character reference more quickly than a resume. A reckless bid costs you exactly 2 invitations and 1 ounce of coal goodwill. Between hands, classifieds bloom. Room to share alternate nights with clean sleeper. Must like silence. Coal order forming. Savings by bucket. Dark blue ribbon missing. Last seen on stair. Reward in cookies. The corkboard by the door carries tiny economies clipped to pins. A sewing lesson for a spool of silk. A French lesson for 2 evenings of errands. Piano practice in exchange for not playing the piano at all. Music binds what rumor phrase. The pianist there is always one coaxes the 2 honest keys into waltzes that remember Vienna from postcards. A contralto volunteers a hymn the way a lighthouse volunteers light. Someone finds a penny whistle in a drawer that has never belonged to anyone and proves it by playing it like a regret. Even the landlady hums. And when the gas hisses, the chorus favors the quiet songs that eat the least oxygen. Lullaby saved from earlier lives. Tunes that rode steerage under shawls. Refrains from revival tents. Verses from beer halls. Fragments of somebody's father's best day. Letters are written in the parlor's best penmanship. A boarder borrows the desk and composes a submission to the editor. The parlor edits with the charity of strangers who will be family until Saturday. Another writes, "Home, dear mother. The landlady is not unkind. The city is loud. I am still good." And 3 women quietly add the kind of advice they wish someone had added to theirs. The landlady initial censors in pencil. No names that can bleed. No promises you cannot eat. The parlor has seasons that do not match the calendar. In winter, it is boiled wool and gossip thick as gravy. Steam ghosts the gas globe. Rubber overshoes arrange themselves like commas along the baseboard. Conversation gravitates to words like coal and croup. In spring, windows crack a cautious inch, and the room thaws into scandal. Engagements appear like crocuses, and every crocus has a cousin. Summer brings fans that whir like insects in manners that steam. Tea becomes lemonade. Secrets dress lighter and show their ankles. Autumn tightens everything. Belts, budgets, lips. Rules hold the room together like upholstery tacks. No politics on Wednesdays. It never works. No card playing after 10, except when the cards are already dealt. No singing in German unless Mrs. Strauss leads. She always does. Men stand when a woman enters unless she's carrying a tray. Then they thank her and scatter to make room. No calling anyone a liar. Mistaken is the house word. No discussing wages in front of children unless you want them to grow up quicker than your laundry dries. And still, with all the rules, something like kindness presides. Scandals, when they flare, are managed the way one manages a dress that has caught at the hem. Pause, free, smooth, continue. The landlady becomes both weather and shelter. She shifts chairs as if adjusting reputations. She pours tea as if diluting pain. Her eyebrow messages: left, careful, right, compassion, both. Compliance steers ships through a narrow harbor. People confess to her, without quite meaning to. She keeps the secrets that are safe to keep, and throws the others out with the ashes before they ignite the settee. Sometimes the parlor stages a play by accident. A young man brings a bouquet to the wrong door. A girl accepts it by mistake. The landlady orchestrates a correction so gentle that both leave feeling they did the right thing. Sometimes it hosts a tribunal with cookies, 2 roommates, 1 missing ribbon, 1 suspicious cat, the verdict rendered by unanimous crumb. Sometimes it becomes a newsroom, a strike vote rumored, a meeting tentatively blessed, a list circulating that looks more like a prayer than a plan. The parlor allows it, polices it lightly, and, when necessary, rings the bell. Night shifters claim it in the odd hours, like seabirds claiming a warm rock. At 1 a.m., the parlor becomes a whispering harbor for the crew that clocks in at dark. A policeman unbuckles his day. A printman's hands stop trembling over the latest headline. A nurse folds the city into 4 and places it under the fern. They drink tea weak enough to keep secrets and trade stories strong enough to bear them. When dawn comes sideways through the lace, they snuff the gas, straighten the pillows, and leave the room ready for the day shift to pretend it has always belonged to them. Above the mantel hangs the embroidered commandment, Home, Sweet Home. Everyone agrees the grammar is optimistic and the doctrine aspirational, but the parlor almost gets there. It takes your day, rinses it in warm light, and hands it back with the wrinkles pressed into meaning. Out in the city, you are a surname, a job title, a number on a pay envelope. In here, you are the person who can sight read the serial, the partner who never reneges, the singer who knows, verse 3, the one who always refills the sugar bowl, the man who laughs soft enough to let someone else sleep. If you don't have a secret, borrow one. We share everything else. At the far end of the hall, tucked into the creaky corner like a forgotten afterthought, sits the tin tub. It's less of a fixture and more of an event. No curtains here, just an exposed reminder of the boarding house's laissez-faire approach to privacy. The tub, with its scuff marks and dented corners, waits for its turn like an obedient servant ready to transform from an old wash bin into a basin of semi-purity at the whim of whoever dares to wield the hot water key. Water is scheduled with the kind of precision usually reserved for military maneuvers. Monday is for the early risers. Tuesdays are the medical staff's domain. Wednesdays belong to the morning shift. And Saturdays? Well, Saturdays are when the whole house becomes a soap opera. The water heater hums with anticipation at the thought of all the elbows that will soon be in its basin. And the landlady has already pegged an early time slot for her own wash. After all, someone has to look presentable. The journey to the tub is a pilgrimage. And the pilgrims? The denizens of the boarding house, fully prepared to argue, squabble, and, in rare moments, cooperate for the simple right to wash off the grime of a week's work. You stand in line with your bucket, your soap, and your sense of dignity, which tends to wilt in the presence of the very real possibility of being next in line for the coldest water. There are no reserved spots, no priority queues for tenants with more expensive rooms. Just a rotating roster of bodies, all looking at each other with a mixture of camaraderie and competition. Soap diplomacy is a delicate art. The soap might start out as a pristine bar, its scent a promise of lavender-scented glory. But by the time it has traveled through the hands of 20 different boarders, it is more of a collective memory than an actual solid. Some soak it under their armpits for efficiency. Others use it for just one body part, hoping to make it last longer. But by the end of the day, it's nothing more than a sad sliver of soapy history, a silent participant in a shared struggle to maintain some semblance of personal hygiene in the face of cramped living conditions and not so fresh air. Saturday night? That's when the battle for cleanliness reaches its peak. The tin tub becomes the setting for a performance, an open-air stage for modesty, survival, and social protocol. It's not a fast operation either. There's no speed here, no quick and done mentality. First, you pour your kettle, then your next kettle. And by the time it's your turn to get in, you've spent more time preparing for your bath than you'll spend in it. When you do finally step in, it's a slow process, every inch of skin acclimating to the lukewarm water. You'd call it refreshing if you were in the mood to lie. Meanwhile, everyone else waits their turn. Some pacing, some chatting, some quietly enduring the slow drip of time and the looming promise of another lackluster bath. The long hallway is filled with the echoes of anticipation, the creak of the floorboards as someone shifts their weight, the muffled sounds of water being added to the tub, and the conversations beginning to turn into their own form of social currency. The waiting list is more of a political chess game than a practical cue. Who's in, who's out, who got there first, and who made a tactical move to cut in. And of course, the eternal towel dispute. In a boarding house with thin walls and even thinner patients, everyone has their own method of dealing with towels. Some will hang theirs on the end of their door. Others will carefully stow them in their room like prized possessions. But everyone knows, towels are for sharing, and they are, in equal measure, rare. The classic strategy involves sneaking a towel to your room, laying it on your bed, and praying no one else has claimed it as their own by the time you need it. But the real secret? The mythic hot water window. That golden, fleeting window of time when the water has reached that perfect balance between too cold to be refreshing and too warm to be comfortable. It's a careful science. If you get in too early, you'll be sloshing around in lukewarm despair. If you're too late, you'll be straining against cold water and body heat, an experience that's barely even cleansing at all. But if you time it just right, well, you'll experience a level of comfort and satisfaction that makes the rest of your week worth it. Somehow, the shared bathroom space is never quiet. There's always someone knocking, always someone who doesn't quite understand the unspoken etiquette of bath time. Occupied doesn't mean what you think it does when someone's desperate enough to barge in, thinking they deserve the next turn. You negotiate your space like a seasoned diplomat, exchanging glances and short, clipped words with fellow tenants as if you're planning a covert mission. It's a strange, awkwardly functional kind of peace you build as you try to respect one another's right to be clean without actually being clean at the same time. If you've ever lived in a boarding house, you know that fire safety is a game of chance more than protocol. The house runs on kerosene lamps, and the smell of burning oil is just another part of the ambiance. The wires in the walls have seen better days, frayed like the cuffs of a well-worn suit, and the stoves, where everyone gathers in winter, are as much a source of warmth as they are of danger. The stairwell, far from being a place of peace, doubles as the house's chimney. Every time someone hurls a log onto the fire, you can hear the walls sigh in protest. A slight draft? That's nothing, just the house clearing its throat. A burst of heat from the kitchen? Oh, don't worry, that's just the stovepipe trying to make a break for it. But the real show starts when the fire drill bell rings. The sound itself is a sharp reminder that this house, like every other one in the city, has no plans for dealing with a blaze beyond the bare essentials. It's more of a hoped-for evacuation than an actual protocol. The bell rings. Everyone knows what to do. And it's never quite as fast as you'd like it to be. In a moment of sudden panic, some throw on blankets, like medieval knights preparing for battle. Others scramble for their ledgers, because, let's face it, keeping track of rent is the only thing that matters at this moment. The sacred coffee tin, the one that lives in the back of the cupboard and mysteriously never empties, becomes the carrier of everything precious: coins, loose jewelry, old receipts, and of course, the small stack of letters and family photos tucked away under the floorboards. The first neighbor you encounter is already halfway to the window, a half-burnt scarf hanging from their head. It's not that bad yet, but the smoke smells funny, they tell you, pointing back to the thickening haze. As you stand there, assessing your place in the disaster hierarchy, you remember the bucket brigade, an old ritual that makes as much sense as it doesn't. It's a game of passing. The water one neighbor fills a bucket, hands it to the next, who hands it to the next, and on it goes until the water reaches the base of the flames, or someone's arm gives out from all the not doing. Of course, the insurance man will arrive later, after the fire's over, of course, and after the smoke has started to clear. Accidental, he'll say, with a satisfied nod, marking the first page of the ledger with the ease of a professional. No one wants to ask about the damage to the roof, or the fact that half the fire department showed up only because someone had left a kettle boiling a little too long on the back burner. But today, the house has survived. No one lost their shoes to the flames. No one's precious belongings are in the hands of the city. And maybe, just maybe, the house will stay standing for another few months until it's time to patch the cracks again. The miracle is that nothing catches fire today. The stove that was going to burst at the seams has done no more than hiss at you in disdain. The frayed lamps have stopped flickering ominously. And when the alarm bell sounds, by now, more of a suggestion than a fact, you remember why you've stuck it out in this place for so long. The fire may come, but not today. And that, oddly enough, is enough for now. The dining room in a boarding house is its own kind of choreographed chaos. An intricate dance of elbows, patience, and determination, all played out over steaming bowls of oatmeal and questionable coffee. The moment the breakfast bell rings, the performance begins. The hallway bursts into a slow-moving parade, with every resident moving toward the dining table as if it were the last train out of town. The rhythmic sound of boots on worn wood floors fills the space, punctuated by the occasional cough, the rustle of someone adjusting their shawl, or the quiet shuffle of feet that haven't quite woken up yet. Oatmeal is the star of the show, of course. A humble parade of porridge, sometimes with sugar if it's a good week, sometimes with a dollop of cream if you're lucky. The serving spoon clangs against the pot with a sound that could be described as both reassuring and tragic. Everyone gets their bowl, but the amount of oats varies depending on how early you manage to get to the kitchen. Late risers get the leftovers warmed up, thin and clinging to the sides of the pot like they have their own plans for the day. But the early birds? They get the fresh batch, thick and hot. Each spoonful a miniature victory in an otherwise monotonous morning. Eggs, on the other hand, are a luxury one, reserved for those with a little more disposable income and a lot more fortitude. If payday was kind, and if the landlord's share of the rent hasn't yet made it to the ledger, you might be treated to an egg, one egg, perhaps two if you're seated next to someone who's either generous or doesn't believe in breakfast solidarity. The egg is always overcooked, but it's there, and that's what counts. It's a nod to the idea that, yes, you could afford a slightly higher class of breakfast. And then there's the coffee. Ah, the coffee. The boarding house coffee is a beverage that defies all laws of science. You don't so much drink it as you challenge it. It's thick, bitter, and aggressive, like a conversation you're too tired to be part of but feel compelled to finish. If it had a resume, it would list sustenance as its only skill. A single cup is enough to bring you to life, or at least to semi-consciousness. It's the kind of coffee that doesn't just wake you up, it forces you awake, like the landlord's eye glinting over a ledger. By the end of the meal, your spoon could stand on its own, which is both a blessing and a warning. Once the coffee has been dealt with, it's time to navigate the seating arrangements. Seating is never random. It's more of a delicate dance of social hierarchy, unspoken rules, and sheer practicality. The clerks, those high-ranking denizens of the boarding house, claim the best seats, the ones nearest the windows or the stove. They arrive promptly at 7 a.m., sharp as their ink pens, and settle into their spots with the ease of people who know their worth. The seamstresses follow closely behind at 7:20, tucking their needles and thread into their pockets as they take the next tier of seats. Those arriving after them? Well, they're stuck with the back bench, the spot closest to the door where the cold air sneaks in and where everything smells faintly of the hallway. For the printers, things are a little more chaotic. Their schedule depends on the printing press. When the press stops, and only then, do they shuffle into the dining room, always apologizing for being late, but never quite managing to catch up. Their seats are a mix of hurried efficiency and reluctant politeness, and their breakfast is often punctuated by rapid discussions of typefaces, fonts, and the latest gossip about local newsprint. The presses may churn out the news of the day, but in the boarding house, it's breakfast that churns out the real stories. Lunch pail assembly is something entirely different. After breakfast, it's time for the working class to assemble their sustenance for the day ahead. The men with pie wedges tucked into their tin pails, the women wrapping up their pickles, and everyone taking just a little bit more pride in their midday meal than they do in the morning oats. A sandwich, a wedge of pie, and perhaps a small token of hope. Something sweet, something salty, something that says, "I'll make it through today." The process is both practical and symbolic. A humble task, yes, but it's a routine that carries meaning. It's about the work, about getting by, about finding moments of joy in things like freshly baked bread or a pickle so crisp it crunches like the hopes you had last week. There's an unspoken unity in the act of packing lunch, as if the process itself prepares you for the rigors of the day. No matter your status in the boarding house hierarchy, everyone gets a lunch pail, and everyone knows that when you sit down to eat, the world outside can wait. When the first sliver of daylight creeps through the grimy window, it's time to face the most important fixture of the boarding house, the job boards. The walls of the hallway are a patchwork of opportunity, necessity, and desperation. all pinned together with worn-out straight pins and the occasional stray thumbtack. The cards flutter like flags in a windless room, all proclaiming one thing: opportunity. Wanted clerk for a stationery shop. Roommate sought for the coldest room in the building. Piano lessons. No experience required, but a good ear would help. The cards stare at you like they're trying to make a deal before you've even read them. There are always more cards than jobs, more possibilities than time. In the land of short tempers and shorter paychecks, the job board is the place where dreams are both sold and shucked. You stop in front of it, pretending to read, pretending to be interested in the clerk job that offers less than your current rent, but promises fancy office hours, whatever that means. There's no sense in reading them all. You know that only the first few are worth fighting for. The rest are dead weight. Another week's false hope, neatly thumbtacked in place. Networking here doesn't require a handshake or a polished resume. It's all about being seen and hearing what you're not supposed to. The corsets, cuffs, and polished boots are the badges of this social exchange. You can't speak directly about opportunity, not in the corridors of the boarding house, but everyone knows someone who has heard about someone who just lost their assistant in a tobacco factory. You don't approach anyone directly with your business. No, the art of securing a job here is in mastering the undercurrent of gossip. Lean on the banister, look casual, and wait for the right whisper to float your way. If you time it right, you'll learn all about the piano lessons, the factory openings, and which streetcar conductor has been acting unusually charitable in exchange for a free lunch. Everyone's career path is a series of half-spoken truths and fully clenched jaws. Trading references is another fine art. The best ones don't come from written letters. They come from people who know someone. Your connection isn't found in the pages of a paper, but in the firm handshake of someone's uncle, the nod of a landlord's cousin, or the raised eyebrow of the tailor you overheard complaining about the lack of business. References are passed like currency, exchanged quietly over whispered conversations in the parlor or the back kitchen. "Oh, you know Mr. Jacobs?" someone asks, almost as an afterthought. "He was my landlord in Chicago." And that's all it takes. A single name, a single connection, and now you have a seat at the table of opportunity. As the day begins to tick on, there's a kind of urgency that takes over. It's the daily gamble. Will you catch the streetcar at the right time to make it to the office? Will you be quick enough to grab the last job before the next boarder beats you to it? Time and location become your best allies or your worst enemies. The daily shuffle through the streets of the city is filled with a sort of desperate optimism. People dress themselves in borrowed hope, clutching their bags or briefcases, hoping that this time, this day, they will find the right job. You walk through the streetcar stop, trying not to show how much it matters, trying not to look at the man holding a small pile of papers, the latest help-wanted ads. The factory jobs are offered with the same quiet desperation. They come with a promise of steady work, but for too many, they're nothing more than a place to pass the hours, a wage to exchange for food and shelter. The men on the board read the cards with more seriousness than their futures warrant. And it's not just about wages. It's about who you know and what you hear from behind closed doors. In a way, every job in the boarding house is a step forward, even if it's just a step into a new set of chairs that squeak a little louder or a corner office where no one ever sits. You know deep down that there's more to the job search than just finding something that pays. The jobs you want are often the ones most elusive, guarded like treasure buried behind layers of social capital. The game of job hunting in a boarding house is not just about knowing the right skills, but knowing the right stories. And with the right stories, well, anything could happen. In a boarding house, survival is an art, and the toolkit is simple, yet surprisingly effective. Each day is a careful negotiation between what little you have and what you need to make it through the day without losing yourself or your socks. The budget rituals are some of the first things you learn. The envelopes are your daily companions. No larger than a letter, but heavy with purpose. One for rent, one for coal, one for laundry. The envelope for rent is always a little thicker, the one with the weight of urgency pressing against the fragile paper. The envelope for coal? Well, that's the real negotiation. A little less coal means a little more warmth for the neighbors, until you can't feel your fingers anymore. The laundry envelope? Well, that one is a luxury, a small victory. You try to remember if you have any pennies left to put in it by the time the landlord comes by to collect. You develop safety habits over time, Strategies that don't just keep your belongings from being stolen, but also help preserve some level of dignity. The key on a string around your neck is the first line of defense. It's the oldest trick in the book. You can't just leave your room unlocked like a foolish traveler from another time. You hide your key where it can't be found, always a few inches from your neck. Your shoes are placed carefully by your bed, ready for quick action. And you have that dime stitched into the lining of your coat, tucked away for emergencies. Not that you'll ever admit what the emergency is. Maybe it's for the cab ride you'll never take or the bottle of gin you'll pretend to forget. But it's there, just in case. The boarding house environment doesn't do much for health either. There's the constant battle against sickness, the daily game of who's going to be ill next. Health hacks are passed around like secrets. Some a little dubious, some downright unproven, but all embraced in the spirit of survival. The onion poultice is a classic remedy. You slice up an onion, stuff it into a rag, and apply it to your chest or feet. Anything to beat the latest cold that's circulating in the hallway. It doesn't smell great, but it's cheap. And when you're stuck in a room with 3 strangers and a dog, cheap is about as good as it gets. And then there's the patent tonics, which are marketed like a cure-all for everything that might be wrong with you. Whether it's your insides, your joints, or your inability to sleep through the noise of your neighbor's alarm clock. You take the recommended dose, which is often a bit more generous than the label suggests. Maybe it'll help you sleep, or maybe it'll just add to the haze of the morning after. Either way, it's better than nothing. As for fresh air is like a prescription for the soul, even if it comes with a side of window leak and drafts. The window in your room is both your escape and your nemesis. You crack it open for a moment of sweet, fresh air, before the chill becomes a solid, frost-bitten slap to your face. But you close it anyway, pretending that the next breath will somehow feel like relief. It doesn't, but it does. And for just a second you think, maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this winter with your lungs intact. The self-care advice from the boarding house is simple. Open the window and regret it. If you can manage to keep your spirits high, your feet dry, and your pocketbook only mildly empty, you're doing better than most. No one expects you to thrive in a boarding house. They just expect you to survive. The small victories pile up in quiet ways. Getting through the night without your belongings disappearing, managing to sneak an extra blanket from the laundry room, or being able to keep your coat buttoned while you walk through the drafty halls. These little wins keep the engine of survival running, even when it feels like the world is closing in with every cold gust of wind from the street. The boarding house may be a relic of the past, but the essence of it lives on, morphed into the modern urban jungle of roommates, co-living spaces, and sublets. Today's version of communal living is slicker, smarter, and much more on demand. But the DNA of the boarding house still courses through it all. From shared bathrooms to bathroom schedules, the soft hum of roommates gossiping at 2 a.m., and the thump of a distant bass line vibrating through walls, it's clear that nothing really changes. It just looks different. When you sign that lease for a New York apartment, or click accept on your latest Airbnb, you're unknowingly signing up for the same unspoken rules and rhythms that governed boarding houses for decades. Today, house rules are better disguised as lease clauses. They still govern everything from what time the music can stop to who gets to use the kitchen when. And, just like in the boarding house days, some people will push those rules. They'll leave dirty dishes in the sink, crank up the heat in winter until the pipes groan, or take a shower at 4 a.m. because they can. Parlors have transformed into group chats, where dinner plans and complaints about who left the empty cereal box in the pantry are posted in real time. Just like back then, there's always a point in the day when you end up sitting in front of the fridge with your roommate, swapping stories of the day. Maybe one person's gotten a new job, or someone's seen their ex on the street, or maybe someone else just found a coupon for 50% off dinner. These brief exchanges, the ones that make you feel less like a stranger in a space you share, are the threads that keep the modern boarding house spirit alive. Despite all the improvements, some things just won't ever change. The walls are still thin now, more metaphorically than structurally. But it's the same story. The loud, late-night arguments, the early morning alarm clock, the thudding bass from your neighbor's workout playlist or opera recital, the smells from the kitchen. The details have changed, but the problems are evergreen. And, of course, there's the coffee. The coffee, my friends, has always been a universal constant in the boarding house experience. Today, it's that slightly burnt cup of overpriced coffee from a takeout joint around the corner, a watery mess with enough caffeine to make you feel like a productive adult, or at least give you the illusion of one. It's the same as that suspiciously dark, bitter concoction served in chipped mugs on the long communal tables of boarding houses. It doesn't taste great, but it gets you through the morning. The same complaints you had then about the noise, the lack of privacy, the questionable cleanliness of shared spaces are still complaints you'll find in modern urban living. You've just traded the chalky walls and musty bedspreads for a loft apartment with exposed brick and a Pinterest-worthy kitchen. But at the end of the day, your neighbor still won't answer the doorbell when the package is misdelivered. The microwave is left one beep away from explosion, and the entire building feels like it's always one thin wall away from chaos. When you look at the long history of boarding houses, you can't help but see how they stitch the fabric of cities together. Week to week, job to job, heart to heart, these humble dwellings acted as the first rung on the urban ladder for many newcomers. Whether you were arriving to work in a factory, find your fortune, or simply get away from a life that no longer fit, the boarding house was your first taste of city life. It was where the solitary nature of rural life collided with the frenetic pulse of urban energy. You weren't just living in a room. You were plugged into a world of connection, struggle, and survival. The experience was communal in every sense, and the rules, however strict, created a structure where the unpredictable nature of city life could become just a little bit more predictable. Looking at life now, it's clear how far we've come. We've traded ledgers for apps, kerosene lamps for bright LEDs, and ink-stained fingers for touchscreen swipes. Yet, even as the world becomes more digital and increasingly individualistic, so much of what made the boarding house world tick remains alive in our modern living spaces. Sure, we've got private apartments, but we still queue for bathrooms, share rent, and yes, borrow sugar and gossip with just as much ceremony as the tenants of yore did in their noisy parlors. The basic needs and communal rhythms haven't really changed. They've just evolved into new forms. Maybe it's the rituals we miss, the daily shuffle for hot water, the shared complaints, the unspoken bond created by the tightness of living in close quarters. Maybe, at the end of the day, we're just as reliant on each other as we were back then, whether it's for a cup of coffee, a favor, or simply a good laugh about that one neighbor who always leaves their shoes in the hallway. In a way, that's the magic of the boarding house. There's a story in every corner and a person to share it with. So, wherever you're headed today, whether it's your own private apartment or the shared kitchen in your co-living space, may your rent be paid, your towel be dry, and your coffee merciful. And if the walls are thin, may kindness be thicker. As long as we remember to share, to laugh, and to help each other get through the day, the spirit of the boarding house will live on, in one form or another.